your fabulous self.
Surprise! We're back. We're having a session here in Baku in COP29 in Azerbaijan. And Rina is not with us. She's not here in Baku, but we have two amazing guests joining us with the Despise Girls. And we're actually being reminded that Yeb is the second man who comes and joins us to the Despise Girls session. So, Yeb, you have to live up to the expectations. Why is this guy in a Despise Girls session? But we also have an amazing guest with us, which is Amy. She's been helping us in getting language in the mitigation negotiations. And Yev has been following also finance, so we have a lot of updates on that. And I mean, Tete is gonna tell us about her geeky negotiation track, but mostly we want gossips. Gossip people, gossip.
I'm not quite sure about the gossip part. Maybe in the next episode.
Okay.
When we're not here.
No, we can say some
Okay.
gossip. But
Okay, I'm being the conservative one
no,
now.
just don't put me in trouble.
I always do. I always do.
So I don't know. Maybe who wants to start?
So we're now in the last 3 days of COP29. You know how fast time flies when you're having so much fun.
Oh yeah, ooh. Partying on.
Yeah, but seriously, we're just here able to do this broadcast because there are a lot of things happening, just not including us, because we're just mere mortals with our yellow badges, and the only ones that can enter the rooms where actual hard negotiations are happening are those with pink badges.
No, so what is happening here? Okay. The main thing is that in this COP, everything revolves around finance because this year, in this COP precisely, we have a commitment to meet here that is so important for the survival of life on the planet, which is to achieve a new collective quantifiable climate finance goal.
I have a song for that.
Which is what we call NCQGs.
NCQG.
Cute that with the song. And then it's been horrible. So to remind people, we've been having technical expert dialogues across 2 years.
3 actually.
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years.
And we started with very inclusive conversations, more like a workshop with civil society, social movements. Everybody could come in, UN agencies. And then it went into a negotiating format. And then we started to having our first draft, 60 pages. Was it 60 or 70 pages long? We went to 35 and now I think we're in 25 now, but it's still a mess. So maybe someone wants to tell us how the landscape of the discussion of the SPGs are looking like.
Yeah, what's the lowdown on the finance discussions?
Lowdown. Well, first, of course, the NCQG is the centerpiece of the COP.
Tell us who you are.
Oh, sorry. Hello, my name is Yeb Sanyo. I'm from the Philippines. I'm following the finance negotiations here, but I'm also a former negotiator. That was my past life. Now I am among the mere mortals.
He resuscitated to a better life.
Yes. Sometimes I call myself a recovering climate.
We'll help you.
So there's a reason why everybody says this is a finance camp, right? Because finance is not just some random topic that is in the agenda. And it's not just because they set this deadline for this COP to agree on this NCQG. That's actually in paragraph 53 of the Paris decision. But it's important because it is the blood life of all kinds of climate action. Without finance, how can you expect mitigation to happen? How can you expect communities to adapt? And more than that, now with escalating climate impact, how do you respond to loss and damage? So it is the basic underpinning of all negotiations. And having followed this process for a long time, finance has always been the most contentious issue, and that's where we find ourselves in on on a Wednesday. So Wednesday, right?
Yep.
On a Wednesday of the second week.
Barely 72 hours before the curtain
It
falls.
should be closing on a Friday, although no cup has ever closed on a Friday. But yeah, it speaks volumes about the lack of confidence in this process, because if you're dealing with a 25-page text with 170 or so paragraphs with huge divergence among countries, and then you submit that for the ministers to deal with, and that's what's happening right now, continuing negotiations among ministers and among heads of delegations. Who knows where it will land this week, right? Because it's, well, to say it's late in the game and we don't know what's happening. But this is very worrying because finance has always been really sticky issue. And why? Because developed countries are supposed to be responsible for providing finance to developing countries refuse to do it, refuse to fulfill their commitments. They failed many times. They've broken so many promises, including the 100 billion they promised that they will mobilize by 2020, and they were not able to do so. So it does not really inspire any trust in the process. So both sides do not trust each other when it comes to building the architecture for finance, and this is really the challenge we're facing. We should remain optimistic because there's no choice. Right? Having a strong finance outcome here is not optional really, and there's so much at stake, especially for the most vulnerable communities and countries that are struggling and striving to develop.
There are so many nuances in the discussion of climate finance. We're not only talking about a goal like a huge, we are talking huge numbers, trillions, hopefully. But then on the other end, as Jeb was saying, the developed countries are saying that their minimum floor is this $100 billion, which is nothing, it's ridiculous. And they're actually saying, we already have a number, it's that, and so they don't even want to bring a number to the table. But this, besides the discussion on the number, there are so many things like the quality of the flows that cannot be in terms of loans. It has to be made by public funding that is mostly should come in terms of grants. And today there's a very funny meme in the ECO, which is the publication that is shared around society with huge grants doing like this. And it's like huge grant also wants huge grants in the NCQE, which is very funny. And but of course we also want delivery to be expedient, also to reach the most impacted communities. So we want very novel language on direct access to women's organizations, the most impacted communities, indigenous peoples, the youth, etc. And so it's tough to negotiate not only the amount but the quality and the way in which it can also only happen through public funding and not private funding, so that we are avoiding that multinational companies or profiting companies are just wanting to make a business out of what it should be a very strong effort of solidarity across the world to achieve also global justice.
So we're down to the last 72 hours, but there's still that big question mark. How much are we talking about here? And no one is actually putting in, the figures on the table. We hear a lot of gossips. That's where one gossip comes in, like one group of developed countries are saying they're willing to put in or discuss, open to considering 200 to 300 billion dollars, when in fact, there is a lot of study, a lot of research that shows the global north owes us $5 trillion a year. It's not a one-time payment, no, but $5 trillion per year to uh, to pay up, for all of their historical emissions, current emissions, and extractivism, etc., etc. But they're nowhere near discussing the amount that would be the next, the new goal on climate finance. And then you mentioned earlier something about the delivery. So here in Baku, there's this crazy thing about having a provision goal and a mobilization goal. So we're suddenly becoming, finance experts or pretending to be finance experts. So yeah, can you break it down for
Over to
us?
you, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, break it down.
Well, how I wish we didn't have to be an expert on analyzing the failures of each camp, but let me probably share insights around the 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 most contentious parts of this, aside from the figure. Tetet already explained why it needs to be huge because that's based on the needs and the cost of climate on developing countries. But also in relation to the contributor base is a debate here. Who should be putting money into the process? Who should be accountable for or responsible for providing and also mobilizing all of these resources.
What's the
It's very clear.
difference?
So let's go to this issue about provision and mobilization. So in simple terms, when you mobilize, you don't really give it, right? You just invite the flow of money potentially. But to provide means you actually disperse the money. So rich countries refuse to commit to providing money. And mobilization also means they are avoiding the responsibility of taking that from their own national budgets, from public funds. Because mobilizing is a euphemism for, okay, let's invite many kinds of sources into contributing towards climate finance, including investments which will not benefit anyone. Why? Because we will definitely not succeed at averting the climate crisis with investments, because most investments will flow towards uh, activities with business return on those investments.
And you'll never save the burning planet with solar panels.
Yeah, and the injustice of this is it will not go to those countries where which are not considered as viable markets for all of these investments. You're talking about poorer countries or very remote countries, and countries also plagued with post-colonial bad governance. They're not gonna get this money, so and or these investments. So this is a red herring, if that's the right word, for saying that this is should be part of the deal. Investments should be part of the deal. So mobilizing is their way of couching all of these things into the deal, and we cannot accept that because mobilization could be anything and everything we don't know, and potentially will likely not come. So providing is the strong language we want, and also not just providing, but a large figure commensurate to what science is saying, what the analysis is telling us, which is in the trillions.
And this brings us to what Amy can help us understand better, because there was an effort at the beginning of this call to bring markets into the featuring role as one of the major achievements of the presidency of Azerbaijan here. And and it has to do with the role of markets. And we have said many times here what are the core solutions, but then it's totally related to what Jeb is saying, because some people are trying to say here that markets are a way to invest in climate finance, and that's already bringing the amount of money that is needed. But Amy has been following very closely the discussion on mitigation, but also trying to stop the role of markets with another discussion that is happening in parallel, which is Article 6. So Amy, explain us why it's so important that people is also interested in understanding the discussions on Article 6.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy, also known as Women Lim. Back to what Yep has said, on resource mobilization. So there's also discussion in NCQG talking about getting resources from voluntary carbon market of carbon market because, as mentioned by him, global north country is not fulfilling their responsibility and trying to source out way to get the financial and put it into UNFCCC. So the best way is carbon market. That's the sort of like the solution nowadays that everyone is talking about, from countries to even grassroots initiative, carbon market, voluntary carbon market. And why is it a false solution? Because carbon markets deal with buying and selling of carbon credits. And how authentic are these carbon credit units? Really contribute to the real emissions reduction that we are talking about so badly needed in Malaysia, in my country. This is the second year we're experiencing um, heat waves, which had never happened before, and floodings in Europe and in India, global south. It's getting from bad to worse. So without real emissions reduction, carbon market is just a camouflage. It's just a way for global north to sort of, you know, balance up their carbon budget in a way that is not even, I would say, ethical, because the issue of double counting, the country that produce the greenhouse gas emissions in global south may use this credit and they're selling it to global north that is also using this credit to claim that we have reduced our emissions. So the issue of double counting is very evident in Article 6, especially Article 6.4. And what is happening now is we have been advocating for the retention or retaining of paragraph 21 in Article 6.4, where CDM activities from
Wait, what's CDM?
clean development mechanism, which is not clean at all
Not
and
really.
has a lot of record of human rights violation, to transition to the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism without scrutiny on additionality, whether it really proves that it really contributes to real greenhouse gas emissions without faking it. So we have deleted this paragraph and we want it back. Without this paragraph, there'll be double counting, there'll be a lot of fake reports on greenhouse gas emissions and contribution. So we will see temperature increasing more and more, and that's the reality. And parties are playing games with our lives of global south people, those from least developed countries, seats, and we need to see and do something about this.
So everything looks very
Suddenly,
dire.
Sorry, I don't have good news yet.
there are good news. What's happening in gender?
Oh yes, so sexy.
Yeah.
No, the negotiation is still happening. So it's maybe you have seen the discussion that it's been facing a lot of obstacles. So I don't wanna speak before because I think that everything now is interconnected, right? So we don't know what is going to happen actually with any of them. Usually, our Despise Girls session during the COP happens on the final day, so we can kind of wrap up the outcomes. But we thought also that it was more interesting to know about the process, what is happening in between, the uncertainty. I think everybody's waiting also many results to come.
It's the waiting game because the new text will come out by midnight.
One of the worries, of course, or in terms of gossip, is whether there's a bad deal or whether countries will accept that. Right? And what does a bad deal mean? For example, if carbon markets are in there, that's a bad deal. If loss and damage is not included, that's already a bad deal. If it's way below the trillions that developing countries
Another
are,
bad deal.
that's another bad deal. So let's see.
We take promise. We just take
But
promise.
what I understand is that developing countries are solid on this. and I hope they continue to stand together.
So we're having layer upon layer upon layer of potentially bad deals coming out from this call. What do you think?
Uh,
Good deal? No deal.
no, I
No or
think
bad deal?
it is. We've always been saying here that it's a tension between another discussion that is trying that many countries want to include here, which is the reform of the global financial architecture. So you've heard us here saying that this is not the place that should happen in the financing for development space because there are so many elements that need to be regulated in a more broad manner. But the other alternative is that the World Bank and the IMF and other the multinational development bank, they want to take this agenda into their own hands. That would be also a bad deal. If there is not a deal here, then the other scenario is also bad because then they're gonna say, okay, we're gonna take care of this, and so the World Bank and the IMF that are governed by the developed countries will have a larger share on the say, whereas at least here we have the possibility of the smaller countries and the global south to push for the conditions that they need. So we have many difficult scenarios, but also there is a troika here, which is composed by the UAE, by Azerbaijan and Brazil. So we're also hoping that there is some positive voices also inside the leadership here. So we want to keep it contained at the moment under the UNFCCC, even though things look very dire. We actually want the dialogue to happen here, and let's see about. And the other thing is, I don't think people talk about this, but this is a major concern of mine. So, climate finance is understood here in the UNFCCC as money that comes from the global north to the global south. But the major emitters are the global north countries, as Amy was already started to say. And so they are the major emitters, and the climate finance that they spend, nobody's tracking that. What is their own investment on their own mitigation? Because also when climate finance experts talk about this is the money that is needed to save the world, there that is not there is not a correlation with the dialogue that is having here because under the UNFCCC, what is the amount of money that developing countries need to do their climate action, which is mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage. What about the larger figure that is needed as well for the global north to do their reduction emissions and to do their yes, their adaptation? Nobody's talking about that because nobody's holding them accountable, and they're just here saying these are the rules for transparency. You need to report on what I give and how the implementation. But then again, they are the responsible for the 92% of excess of carbon emissions. So who is tracking them? There is no discussion on the amount they're spending, the quality of their action they're doing. So I think that's a major gap in our movement in tackling that. We're so concerned, and rightly so, about the mobilization that is needed for the global south in terms of funding, but what about tracking them, because that's also where the life of the planet is at stake. There are so many things that we need to discuss, and that's another debate that is happening in a parallel session, which is on the Standing Committee on Finance, which is the definition of climate finance. But of course, we want to keep it short in terms of the interest for the global south because they need funding, and we want funding to flow to the global south. But I'm just saying there is a bigger conversation that we're not having. I'm really worried about that. So what is happening to that? So let's see. But then again, better to have it here than having in the World Bank, the IMF, etc., or maybe a possibility is to have it in the FFG, but that's also meddling a lot because what Lidi Nakir has been saying all this time, everything that happens in the definition of climate finance needs to happen under the UNFCCC because we have the principles of CBDR, common but differentiated responsibilities. We have a mandate on equity, and everything that is
But even
related to
that
climate
is under
needs to
threat.
be.
You know how developed countries here keep on saying it's only about the Paris Agreement. UNFCCC is so ages ago, so let's not talk about UNFCCC, but now it's about the Paris Agreement. So they keep on saying that because under the Paris Agreement, they would not have all of those principles listed down. Is that right?
Not really,
I
because the
know.
Paris
I
Agreement
know. It's
and,
just a component.
and in the preamble of the Paris Agreement, it says all of this agreement is under the convention.
Right, right. But that's what they want to demolish here.
Well, what they're succeeding in, even if legally they cannot escape, evade the principles of the climate convention, which, by the way, are principles that are extraordinary, uh, and also serves the purpose of justice. They cannot evade the legal aspects of it, but they're winning on the optics of it. The more they say it out there, the more people think that the Paris Agreement is a standalone agreement
Yep,
and is
yep.
devoid of all of these principles. So they are winning the optics battle, and that's really dangerous.
I don't think we have talked about this issue to our audience in the
No,
Despise
we
Girls.
haven't.
It's a major issue since a couple of years now. It's gaining traction, but it just blew up in Bonn this year, and now here is very prominent, which is a debate that people are saying if the Paris Agreement is a standalone document, like it's a binding treaty, and then everybody's signed it and endorsed it, so it has a life of its own, and now it has its body follow up, which is the CMA, and then does the question is does that make it irrelevant the convention that was before and that hosted the birth of the Paris Agreement? But as I have been saying, every covenant that is also a binding document or every treaty, it has an architecture, it has a convention, it has a committee, because it's people and it's the institution that do the follow-up, that do the mandate, that make recommendation, and across time expands on the mandate and expands on the follow-up to say, okay, let's do this working group or whatever. So there cannot be any abstract document without an architecture. So it's the same way that the CEDAW, the Convention on Discrimination, Non-Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, has its committee for the CEDAW Convention because it has the follow-up. It's the same here. We have a convention and we have the agreement, and it's the convention that does the follow-up. So this idea of a abstract ghost superpower, saying Holy Spirit, of a treaty that lives on its own without an embodied flesh is precisely as it sounds, metaphysical. And so we want to really come back to reality, because this is also the discussion on FFD. We want to transform the architecture because the one that is there is not useful, but we don't want to change the documents. We want to change the architecture, the way the bodies are operating, who is ruling them, what is the governance, because that is the debate we're having in FFG. In the same way here, we say the convention has been operating and now we want an implementation of the Paris Agreement. So we don't want to challenge this relation, but we want to see it operational. So that's
But it's very clear why they are questioning the basis of the principles of the convention, because they cannot fulfill their obligations under the convention.
Yeah, so just to explain our people, the thing is in the convention, all of these principles are stated. And then in the Paris Agreement, they're quoting them. And that's what they're saying, that it's a weaker form of being anchored in those principles.
That's why they prefer the Paris Agreement over the convention.
Forgetting everything in the convention. Yeah.
Yep, that's how it is on all fronts. No, even this obscure baby of mine, the Warsaw International. No, it's his baby. Yeah, it's his baby. No, the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage. This obscure kid on the block. No, I haven't followed any of those discussions here because I thought that it would be plain and simple, cut and dry. It's supposed to talk about a joint annual review of the WIM and the Santiago Network on loss and damage, and agreeing on those rules of procedure that we worked on for this whole year. But it turns out, I was reading the notes from the other groups. They're going to put it to Rule 16. It's like, oh my gosh, what's happening here? So it's a simple, not so simple thing about the joint annual report, but apparently things are more complicated. They're making things more complicated than they actually are. I don't know. For instance, in the Santiago network, the developed countries, even in just the illustration, a simple flow chart. They want to remove COP because usually here we say it's COP CMA. So in that simple illustration, they want to remove COP and just retain CMA. So of course, developing countries are up in arms. No, you can't do this. So everywhere, no, all references to anything and everything that would tie developed countries to those legal binding obligations, they want to demolish it, and they want everything to be on a voluntary basis, etc., etc.
Yeah, so it seems like this is very geeky conversation
Yeah.
for you. It's not the usual talk that you have in reading about the what is happening in the cup, but this is why you're really getting the real gossip here of how everything because this is the let us say what is gonna give shape to the larger conversations not only in this cup but towards the future. But I mean, what is happening on mitigation? Or yeah, does anybody can you tell us what is happening? Because that is the other conversation that is conditioning. It both of them are conditioning themselves into the conversations on finance here.
Not involving mitigation per se.
What about you? Yeah?
Well, I think the particular aspect of mitigation here at COP29 is how countries are following through with the decisions from Dubai from COP28, where it was uh, acknowledged that we should be transitioning away from fossil fuels. Now, that language was debated in Dubai until they landed with that kind of framing. And whether we can go beyond that and talk about the fossil fuel phase out is something that we're trying to see whether it could happen here.
Yeah.
But it looks like that's going to be very difficult. It's going to be difficult to move from what was agreed last year to something bigger than that also account the fossil fuel industry. But I think the clamor of developing countries and civil society here is to make polluters pay. And I think it's really important to embed this particular principle to make polluters pay, which is in many ways a principle which is not uh, explicitly stated in the convention. But that's how the convention is structured. That they're asking polluters to actually pay, not just for the cost of mitigation, but for countries that are being impacted.
Yeah, I read yesterday somewhere that making polluters pay does not refer to the fossil fuel industries here in this debate of the NCQG, but rather the developed countries. But then there is this other pending conversation with the fossil fuel industries that are also in a report by CL also have a larger presence of lobbyists than many countries together and civil society overall. So there are major
Like
interests behind
1,700 something fossil fuel lobbyists at this COP alone.
alone. And of course, they're also occupying the plastics negotiation because, as you know, the source of the material with which plastics are made of is also coming from fossils. So they're coming from a different angle and they're calling it this is clean, this is important, this is made for health products, etc. So this is very much needed. And they're trying also to maybe sneak into another negotiation to ensure their survival and then tie it that in that we are doing a good service to humanity. So that's also something that our colleagues are mapping in parallel negotiations at the same time, but it is very pervasive the way that they're entrenching their existence and their business model in negotiations that are supposedly meant to save us from their harm.
Amen.
No!
Gossip, come on. Is there any juicy gossip?
Oh, and just to add, the lobbyists have pink badges. We have yellow badges.
What does it mean to have a pink badge?
Multi badge, multi overflow badge.
It means you're part of the government delegation officially.
But there are also many nice stickers that civil society are making, no? For the badges.
Yeah, like one is
You
I
can
don't
show
have it,
yours.
but
Here it says carbon markets, real climate finance. And then the other one is no climate justice without gender justice.
Mine is the same as the text.
I don't have anything.
Me neither.
I love a very
I want
boring
some. No, but you have the pay.
Yeah, pay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pay
this
up
this is
the
really
land,
nice.
Five
official
trillion. Yeah.
official lanyard.
That's so nice.
Yeah, this is one of the most creative lanyards I've ever
And
seen.
even some government delegations have been using this, no? Especially from the developed countries, which means our messages are reaching them
Yeah.
and they also carry those same
And
messages.
they identify with it.
Mhm, that's true. I got a few more
Show them.
stickers.
Show them. Show
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
This one says climate change is real. And I think that's for the denier who will come into office in January, no? And this one says, don't be a fossil fool.
Ah, that's really nice.
Yeah. And this one, our bodies, our planet, our future. Yeah. Precious.
So in these final days, civil society is trying to ramp up their messages because actually a very nice action took place last week. It was so moving. All of you were there.
Really? You find it
there. I
moving?
found it very moving because it was really horrible that in the context here, since we are not allowed to, well, civil society is not allowed to protest outside, and everything has to happen here in the venue. But they cannot shout, they cannot say, something very strongly. So what they did was hum all of the tunes of all of the slogans that people sing here. So it was a full, because it's like people will never be silenced. All of the movements will be there. So of course they ran out of voice at the end of the action. But yeah, I found it moving to see that people is not being silenced in any context, right?
So instead of shouting, what do you want? Climate science. You were like, so it's really very hard.
But we have lots of banners, so
Yeah.
the
Super
messaging,
colorful.
the messaging is there.
It's also great because it was cross constituency, and it's nice to see the size and the show of force of the policies here.
It was full with messages from demanding climate finance, on gender responsiveness,
No
or
carbon market.
and against debt, climate debt using
Make polluters pay.
and so many the indigenous peoples, peoples with disability, the youth, everybody was there. It was really moving. The feminists had also a stand, and labor and trade unions. So it was really, really powerful.
Okay, I'm glad that you found it powerful.
Because as usual, it's the people that make it worth it to be
Oh.
here.
Tomorrow we have the people's plenary.
That's right.
Yeah.
What time?
3:30.
Yeah, in the afternoon. So we are going to occupy, we were allowed to occupy one of the plenary halls here, and we are going to have our own assembly where we will hear the voices from the different constituencies, from the different groups, all sharing their, not just expectations, but real solutions. I think that's the important part of it because at this COP, we've only seen, false solutions, distractions, smoke screens. So tomorrow at the People's Plenary, every one of us in civil society would be coming to the plenary hall and we will have our own program, not to give strength and draw strength from each other. I don't know what's going to happen next after the People's Plenary.
We're gonna wait. Just before wrapping up our episode, I also wanna say we are waiting for a new draft for the financing for development negotiation, supposedly between the 18 and 20. Today is 20th, so today I have a tough day with negotiations here, plus looking at the first draft, and there are many things that are at stake of the global financial architecture. Also, hopefully, in the next episode, we will be able to be discussing that. And also, for more fun things, the feminist is going to be meeting in Bangkok on in the first week of December. So I hope I will see you, many of you there. And what else? I think because also December is happening a lot of things.
Yeah.
You have another.
There's going to be another meeting in the Philippines this time.
Oh
So
yeah, both of you are gonna be there.
it's the fourth board meeting of the fund for responding to loss and damage. So we can give updates on what's going to happen there, but without a meaningful outcome here in terms of the monies, the amount, the mode of delivery, um, it's just going to be an empty shell, you know.
Yeah, tell us what is happening with the loss and damage agenda.
What?
You can go first.
Well,
It is women Santiago, right?
yeah, but you're the father of Wim. No, but here we've been talking about getting the countries, developed countries, to pledge, because while we have this fund, there is hardly any money in it. We left Dubai last year with only around 700 million something in pledges, promises, and not all of them. I don't think a single dollar has been translated into concrete contributions. Here, we have not heard anything from the biggest polluters, the historical polluters, because they say everything is in on hold until what happens next year. But even Europe, or not surprisingly, we also haven't seen ambition. Only one country from Europe has pledged something, and it's not big money. It only sounds big because it's in their currency, but if you translate it to US dollar, it's like $19 million. So that's it's a drop in the ocean, no? And you know that losses and damages are so huge, the needs are in the trillions, but we're not getting any concrete commitment or even pledges, at least in this COP. So without the NCQG, I don't know. It's
Well,
gonna
that's a
be
debate because
harder.
also people is trying to push for loss and damage to be included in the NCQG. Not a, it's not a given because NCQG, the loss and damage agenda came a bit later after the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement has very specific language on mitigation and adaptation. It is kind of blurry to see what is the space for loss and damage, even though legitimately it belongs there. Pushbacks against having that, and so that's another demand that civil society is having very strongly here. And of course, the developing countries are trying to make the best case for having that, but then the relation with the new fund would also be in a sketchy place if there is not a proper place for loss and damage in the NCQG. So many
So all
things.
the more the rich countries will not be compelled to put in any money because it's not in the new goal. They have a lot of they can have a lot more justification now for wanting everything to be on a voluntary basis. From their bleeding hearts to save the poor and the drowning in the global south. Because there's also good.
Well, the global north has never accepted, and I think they will continue to refuse to accept that loss and damage is a financial obligation for them to fund. So we expect the same thing here when you're talking about making sure that loss and damage does not drop off the table in the NCQG. Then the the problem is if we lose loss and damage in the NCQG, like what that is saying, then there will be no commitments towards the fund for responding to loss and damage. What's funny here is the fund for responding to loss and damage, which was established 2 years ago at COP 27, was unexpected probably for the global north. They did not expect that we will come up with it. Now we have it. They don't want to be committed to it, and they only say no, contributions should remain voluntary.
And what would you say to close before closing in, about yeah, any pending issue that our audience should know?
I'm worried about Article 6. Yeah, Article 6.4, I've mentioned just now, but for Article 6.2, there's not even a mention of the 11th preamble of the Paris Agreement on respecting rights and everything. That is actually very important for us, civil society, women, and all people. So it's not there. And also the engagement of stakeholders in Article 6.2 is very, very weak or even about nil. So we are trying to push for that, and yeah, we will want to see a better text if possible. We are expecting a miracle somehow, and we hope that the miracle will happen because at the end of the day, we are talking about grassroots women, grassroots community who are not here, voices are not heard, and their opinions not even considered, despite all the evidences. But private sector and global north parties wants carbon market
Yeah.
as a justification for net zero, which is a false solution. Justification for greenhouse gas emissions, again, really.
So, fearless forecast. When will this COP finally say it's over, it's ended? You,
You mean the date?
yeah,
Closing
daytime,
plenary.
yeah.
Okay.
I'd say Saturday, 7 p.m., something like that.
Oh no.
Because I see a bulldozer trend since day one.
So which day?
The
Friday.
Yeah, slightly
Be optimistic.
later.
What
Yeah.
about you?
Saturday noon. And you?
I would say Sunday noon.
Oh,
You're gonna
wow.
say yeah, because but not because I'm optimistic, but I think because there is a lot of power those who don't want a deal. There's like a pullback.
You
So
said Sunday.
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 That's the latest it can be.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Reach a record.
But let's see.
Let's see. Watch out.
Let's see.
The winner gets a coffee from each of all of us. And so thank you so much. Now Amy and Jeb are honorary
Yeah.
Thank
Despise
you for having
Girls.
us.
Despicable girl.
So thank you so much. And send us your questions. We will have more maybe in a month.
A
No,
Christmas
we
special.
will have our Christmas special.
Yeah, the ugly sweater special.
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much, and stay tuned for new developments.
Thank you.
Ciao.